think we'll start class by doing the kind of greeting we did last time. So Joichi will now pan the camera around. All right, well, thank you everyone for sending your reflections as the homework. I think we got close to full participation, so gold stars for everyone. I wish I could have got that document out earlier today, but it didn't happen. So I think there'll be kind of a follow-up email from this class going out tomorrow, and you'll get them then. It's about a 5-page document, so it's a little bit of a read. But lots of people gave more than just a couple of sentences, and I think it's really worth the, 10 minutes to read through it and see what's churning for everyone. So I've had fun receiving all those, so thank you again. So tonight, path is the plan. I'm actually feeling really energized for this class. I think we've been hanging out in the suffering for a long time, and it feels nice to be kind of like turning the wheel on that one. And then we'll talk about karma that ends karma. Before I jump in, are there any outstanding questions? I think my plan is today to end at 8:10 with my kind of lecturing at you, and then we'll have time for more full conversations and questions then. So anything hanging out there for anyone? Are we ready to dive in?
Genjo, the volume's a little low. I don't know if it's just me or not.
Oh.
But I'm not hearing you well.
Oh, great. Troubleshoot that, Joichi. How about now? Is that sounding better for folks? Daniel, is that like a thumbs up or is that like a go louder? Okay, that's a good. Okay, great. All right, we'll dive in. So we'll start with a quick review. We talked about the Four Noble Truths. Everyone remember this? And we moved into karma from there. So really it's tying together a lot of what we had already been talking about, but kind of bringing a full synthesis and really inviting this idea of karma, this idea of cause and effect. And again, here's, as Thich Nhat Hanh put it, the first noble truth or truth of the noble ones is that there's such a thing as ill-being, dukkha, suffering, anxiousness, denial, tightness, all these words we can use to describe ill-being. And that has a cause. And the kind of formal way it's talked about, or the first part is arising. There's an arising of it, which usually kind of is shorthand translated to craving, because that's what it says is the cause. And the craving is also shorthand for greed, hate, and delusion, which right there, the center of the wheel, right, is the cock, the pig, and what's the other one? Snake, right? So greed, hate, and delusion, cause of ill-being. Then what's sort of implied by if there's ill-being and there's a cause of ill-being, that means there's something other than ill-being. There's a cessation of ill-being. And that also has a cause. And that cause is what the Buddha termed path or marga. So implied there, right, the real thing we dived into last class was karma, this cause and effect that's got to be at play. If you're going to do this, it means you have to have some understanding of what are the things that cause ill-being, what are the things that cause well-being. And the Buddha was very kind to lay those out for all of us. Before we do that, we'll talk a little bit more about karma. Wrap that up, dive into that real quick. So karma really is a word that means cause and effect or action. And there are all kinds of karma. So there's physical karma, that knocking on this makes a sound. There's societal karma, biological karma, and hereditary karma. We know something of these through the sciences. But it said that the most important for human well-being is intention, kind of the cause and effect that happens within our minds and our bodies and our beings. And also, I didn't talk about this too much last class, but we can see that those have lots of connection with each other. So for example, I can have some understanding of physical karma, hitting something produces a sound and a reaction, but the intention behind that really matters. So that can be used to hit someone over the head with a bat, or it can be used to fly a paper airplane, right? Those are both understandings of physical laws, but that our intention behind them really matters. And a fun one to think about, which we're probably all sort of mired in right now, is let's say, science. We have this really cool tool. We're getting to understand genetics, and all sorts of laws of physicality, but what's the intention behind them? What are the things we're creating? There was a really fun, I don't know if you could say this was fun, there was a little question and answer book that a teacher would read out at the end of a class, and she asked a question. She said, how many of you would invent something that kills like 300,000 people a year? And everyone was like, no, I would definitely not do it. And then someone was like, or she followed it up, how would you have invented the car then? Because the car is an invention that kills lots of people every year. People die through that. So it's kind of like, oh, we have to be aware of our intention as we go through the world and using our powers of knowing something about the physical world, societal realms, biological realms. So just a little aside right there. Intention's what really matters. And so there are 4 kinds of karma that are classically talked about. Skillful, that would be here in path and marga. Skillful, leading to cessation. Then there's unskillful, leading to ill-being. And then there's mixed. There's intention that can have a little bit of both in it. And in fact, almost all of our intention is this mixed kind. Almost all of our intention is mixed. It has roots in both of these. And then the last one is the karma that ends karma. So didn't go too much into that last time, and we'll spend some time with that today. So from here, we've set up a really nice place to talk about a way out of living through disease and anxiousness and path. The very root of it, right, we have this no self, this anicca and anicca and anatta, and no self and impermanence. Those are kind of the big metaphysical backdrop of things, this interdependent origination that as I look at something and it appears to me, it won't last as whatever it's appearing as, right? It won't last. It'll appear according to my intention, the various causes and conditions of my life, and it will disappear. And so that gives rise, that sort of metaphysical backdrop, gives rise to this dukkha, or these 6 realms, which are unskillful ways to conquer, avoid, manage, and deny no self and impermanence, right? And we spent a lot of time thinking about the imagery, how we all move through those different realms throughout our lives in all sorts of different ways. So then we have the karma and 4 noble truths, and right, there's cause and effect in this game, and there's cessation of dukkha, and we can, or said in another way, we can be in harmony with no self and impermanence. Right? Does that flow chart sort of make sense to people? It's kind of I'm repeating all of this stuff a lot of times, but I find that I really need that in order for it to sink in. All right, let's get into path. Let's get into talking about path a bit. And everyone online, I sent a little PDF, my little handwritten verses before class. I was telling people here in person it was really fun to turn that into a PDF. So if you could pull that up now, we'll use that. We'll be looking at that. People in class have that. So once one starts getting some insight into those 4 noble truths and karma, really the next logical step is this atonement verse. And so for those of you who have been here on a Sunday, this is how we start out the Sunday program. And actually, lots of different ceremonies have this as the very beginning. And what's happening here? All my past and harmful karma, born from beginningless greed, hate, and delusion, through body, speech, and mind, I now fully avow. And something funny here, I just realized I'd been reading avow as disavow my whole, Buddhist career. Kind of like, that's no good. I'm disavowing that. But this word avow means something a little bit different, which I think is really important. To declare openly, bluntly, to assert or confess freely. It's just really laying it bare and being willing to look at it, right? You don't have to even pick it up and say, this is bad, but you do have to look at it. You do have to pay attention to it. You do have to be willing to receive the knowledge of your own poor intention and how that affects you. So this is really the obvious place for starting path and getting the gears churning. And next, what's really implied by once you lay open that unskillful karma is a rising of the vow to create skillful karma. And we could call that the Bodhisattva Vow. And maybe before we look at that verse right there, I'll read you sort of another formation of the Bodhisattva Vow. Bodhisattva here meaning being of awakening. The Bodhi here points to, I think I wrote that out for you. Yeah. Bodhi is awakening, Sattva is being. So another way that this vow is talked about often is through a famous sutra called the Diamond Sutra, a teaching that the Buddha was said to have given many moons ago. And I'll share that with you right here. One of his students was watching him throughout the day and basically was totally in awe of how simply and wonderfully and brightly he moved throughout his day. And so he asks, Buddha, how does a bodhisattva sit? How does a bodhisattva act? How does a bodhisattva take hold of mind? Another way to think that's translated is control their thoughts. Give us the program, please, so we can be like you. I'll hold the world in place however you think I should, so that I can be more like you. It's very a sweet thing to ask. And a sort of paraphrase of what the Buddha responds is he says, to take hold of mind, to control your thoughts, a bodhisattva sets the intention to lead every being into nirvana, wherever they may be, however they have come into this world, however mundane or transcendent their experience. And in doing so, the bodhisattva knows that no being is freed. So that's a lot. There's a little enigmatic there. I'm going to do that again. So he replies, to take hold of mind, a bodhisattva sets the intention to lead every being into nirvana, wherever they may be, however they have come into this world, and however mundane or transcendent their experience. Maybe we'll start with that there. So right there, many people will get hung up on the idea, every being, every blade of grass, every insect, but they had not taken this class beforehand. You all have. And so really that phrase there, it's pointing at the wheel of life. It's pointing that any perception of yourself that looks like any kind of being, whether you're in a heavenly God realm, whether you're in a hell realm, whether you're viewing any other being that seems to be in one of these realms, you're realizing you have participation with them, that you're intimately connected, and you give rise to the thought of cessation. You give rise to seeing that even if you're one of the highest gods in the entire realm, everything's going great, and you're sweet and wonderful, and everything's going well, there's still, if your vision is subtle enough, if you're tuned in and you're just there with it, you'll see a little bit of hoping that continues, right? You can see a little bit of clinging anywhere you go. And so you set your sight there and you pour yourself into the path. So this is how a bodhisattva encounters the world, right? Not just for yourself, but for every being, every situation. And then here's kind of the kicker. That all kind of makes sense. But then, and in doing so, the bodhisattva knows that no being is freed. No being is freed. What's that about? And so I'd like to point us back to this image of the mirror and all the beings that appear inside of it. The mirror is pointing us back to total reliance and interrelationship with anicca, and anatta. There's no self and impermanence. That anytime we said anything that comes together, arises together, and is compounded or mashed together, will disintegrate at some point. It'll fall apart. It'll return to all of its constituent parts. So there was never anything we could say that was there permanently. It returned to its source. Just like all of our bodies will, just like all of our thoughts will. Everything is coming and going in total and complete flow all the time. The suffering is where that gets coagulated into something and we need it to stay put, right? And we can see that happening in our own hearts and minds, happening in other beings, happening if you think you have a kind of relationship with someone that you think is going to stay put or not move around at all at some point, right? That if you come together, you'll never part from each other, because even in death you will part from each other. Your bodies will change, your interests will change. Everything is changing all the time. And so, really, this bodhisattva, at once they arise the thought to let beings know that everything's moving and changing all the time, and to participate in that with them. So, as a being seems to be freed, you actually don't give rise to the thought that I freed a being. It's more like, oh, the being here between us, as us, it realized what it was, which is no self and impermanence. Right? So I'm not really expecting you to get that. This is a teaching that is hung out with for many, many, many years. In fact, our teacher here at the temple, I remember I was picking him up from getting his tires changed, and he was just sitting outside reading the Diamond Sutra. He has a little portable copy, and so this is a kind of teaching to be really meditated on and stayed with for a long period of time. So I'll be sure to send that to people. Yeah, Aaron.
Can you just read it one more time?
Yeah. So the whole thing. This is Ananda. Ananda asked this question. How does a bodhisattva sit? How does a bodhisattva act? How does a bodhisattva take hold of mind or control their thoughts? And the Buddha responds, to take hold of mind, a bodhisattva sets the intention to lead every being into nirvana, wherever they may be, however they have come into this world, however mundane or transcendent their experience. And in doing so, the bodhisattva knows that no being is freed. And so maybe to further talk about this point, let's look at this Bodhisattva vow. So this is what we recite at the temple, actually at the end of Sunday service. So beginning, we open up with recognizing all of our harmful karma. And at the end, we take up the heart that says, I'm going to walk the path. Beings are numberless, I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible, I vow to end them. Dharma Gates are boundless, I vow to enter them. The Buddha way is unsurpassable, I vow to realize it. And so again, a little bit of a conundrum here, right? So both of these are talking about the karma that ends karma. The karma that ends karma. So really no longer are we playing with that idea. If we have an idea of bad karma, or dark karma as it can be called, here on the wheel, it's sort of descending into the hell realms. Usually that's from a place of I can get, I want, I'm trying to control the world. I'm forcing my independent view of the world onto everything else, trying to hold it still. That's that dark or negative karma. Positive karma is, oh, I can give things away. I can let things go. I can use things for good. I can help other people. I can be generous. I can be kind with my time because I want to help other living beings. But still, that's locked in a place that thinking that these things are real and that I can do something with them, which in one sense is true, but in another sense, the very root of the mirror, the very root of our lives, is this total profound emptiness of things. This freedom from being life and meaning being contingent on states of mind and different objects. So these enigmatic statements are prepping you for, or expressions of this total letting go of these things. And another image that I like is making each being if we're talking about, let's say, beings are numberless, I vow to free them, say, any being that appears in the mirror of our awareness, we can skillfully point them to the mirror. We can point them to Anita and Anachata. All right, so let's pause there, and we'll move on to more concrete descriptions of the path and see if that can clarify some of those guys a little bit for us as we go. Do the great game show reveal. Okay, we'll see that. Okay, so this Eightfold Path. Here we are. Have people familiar with this a little bit? Just get a hint show. Some people. Okay, and in the text, it's talked about quite a bit. So, this word, right? So the Eightfold Path. Each of these different words here start with this word right. And I forget what the Pali word is exactly, but it can mean something like correct. And a way I like to think of this is we're often talking about this kind of an idea in a very casual way all the time. What's the correct amount of sunlight this plant needs? What's the right nutrition level for this plant for it to produce good oranges? Right? So I think of that right in very much this term that he's saying there's such a thing as human flourishing, and we call that right. That's the correct amount of whatever we need. So it starts off here with view. Right view is really talking about this truth of dependent origination, no self and impermanence. If you're viewing things in that kind of a way, it's in perfect view there will give rise to perfect action in all of these other realms. It's really the root, the root perspective that's at play here. Following that are thoughts, and this word thought is also means intention, right thought or intention. And so here, avoiding thoughts of attachment, hate, harmful intent. And these two, when the word wisdom is often talked about, it's pointing towards these, right? It's talking towards our perspective of the world, what's real and what's not real, what's a good thing to do. The very earliest buds of our consciousness are talking about wisdom. Moving on from that, speech, action, and livelihood. I think that all makes sense, using speech that foster harmony and kindness and directness and clarity. Action, not hurting others, not killing, but supporting life, and livelihood. I like this sheet. It says, not selling slaves, animals, intoxicants, or poisons. But another way we can be thinking about that all the time is, how do I consume? I think that's the way we tend to ask that in our culture right now. How am I affecting the world with my needs and wants and means? And am I sharing those in an appropriate way and not taking more than I really need? So there's a placeholder for ethics, right? That how do my views of the world give rise to actions? And how are those actions ethical or not? And then, I don't know, this next part, I don't want to say it's uniquely Buddhist, but this is where Buddhism gets its sort of flavor as a religion through these next parts. So effort, mindfulness, and concentration. And so effort here, the little statement here that says, is abandoning negative states of mind that have already arisen, preventing negative states that have yet to arise, and sustaining positive states that have already risen. So that's a bit dry. But really, where are you putting your energies, and how are you cultivating energy, and where are you putting that? So is it just for you to feel good, or are you continually turning it back to the path again and again, and not just carving out a place of comfort for yourself? So I think, in a way, it's very easy, and this is warned about on the path again and again, that things will start going well after a while when you're walking the path. You will start having quite a bit of mental clarity. You will be attracting good people around you. You can get to this place in life where things feel pretty good, and you can start to really carve out a nice niche in heavenly realms and the human realms. And so where is the effort that says, okay, this is good and all, but how do I continue to push myself to ask these questions and to continue to cultivate a good and beautiful life for all beings and not just myself. So, and then right mindfulness here, and this mindfulness and concentration, I think, are really closely related. So mindfulness, awareness of all the constituent pieces of the world. And then here, concentration, here, single-mindedness, right? This word samadhi, I don't know if people are familiar with this, you might have thrown that. That means something like meditative absorption. And so where I think this all gets particularly interesting, and where I feel quite a lot of energy around this, is what happens. We can think of this as a nice, anybody play Mario Kart, the game Mario Kart, and you hit this little booster thing, and it makes you go faster, and sometimes they put a lot of boosters next to each other. So in a way, I think this is kind of a booster for your spiritual life. As you start to clarify these, they all start working together and bring a kind of beautiful energy to your life. And here's, in this last part here, this effort, mindfulness, and concentration, I think this is really important for thinking about the Buddhist path, because meditation often, particularly in the West, gets a lot of hype and interest, and it's the place where your whole ability to engage here is deepened. So really, it throws you almost back at the very beginning of what's my view, what's my thought, how do I live that in the world, and then deepen it again. What's my view, what's my thought, how do I live that in the world, deepen it again. And I think this is why meditation can be so A, profound, and B, disorienting. And maybe it's in the other way. Maybe it's A, disorienting, and B, profound. That when you sit quietly, especially in our tradition, and you're not given any particular or very strong instructions, you're said to be with yourself and to be attentive and open your awareness through mindfulness and place your effort there. What appears? And I think for me, what I really notice is my thoughts appear, and they are pointing me back at my view, which I can't see directly. I can't see my own eyeball, but I can see what is the very first thing that my intention perceives, and it's my thoughts, right? It's my thoughts. And so here's where I think this place of concentration is where we continually deepen and expand and grow our ability to be streamlined and sort of fit in these areas of life. And this word concentration has some nice roots in our language, actually. One of the definitions is to intensify the action of. Concentrate, to intensify the action of. So if you're thinking, if you've put your energy towards, you could say, goodness, path, peace, beauty, living a vibrant, energetic, ethical life, then you plug in here, and it intensifies the action of. Throws you back at the beginning. It allows you to see more deeply, more broadly, and to concentrate that energy in a different way. And I wonder if other traditions, prayer is this place. Prayer is this thing which throws you back into a more refined way of questioning how you live and how you view the world, and maybe your relationship with God in there. Just waxing poetic about that, I don't know. Another couple other definitions there, to bring to a common center and concentrate the mind or mental powers. I really like that though, to intensify the action of. Maybe I wasn't going to do this till later, but this really works here well. In our tradition, there are so folks who you see walking around with a rakusu. This is called a rakusu. It's the smallest version of a robe in our tradition. It's sort of robe to go. There was like a how should we get into this? There was a big discussion amongst all the schools that were really similar, kind of Zen schools in Japan at one time, and they said, let's standardize what we wear so we can be one school together. And they decided that this was a good thing, and this ring is really important in some schools. That was like a compromise to say, okay, we can have that small robe as long as you put the ring on it. So anywho, to receive one of these robes, one takes the 16 Bodhisattva precepts, or kind of the ethical code of conduct. And one way to think about it is that you're formally signing up to be a Buddhist. You're proclaiming inside, outside that this is the way you want to live, and you gain strength and energy by making sort of a full confession of that intention. So the very first 3 of those precepts, they're called the 3 pure precepts. Wait, Joichi, which comes first, the pure precepts or the taking refuge?
Must be refuge.
It must be refuge. So first you take refuge in the Buddha and the Dharma and the Sangha. And then after that, so you say, these are the containers I'm going to trust my life to. The Buddha and the teachings and the community of people practicing them. Those are going to be my pots, and I'm going to grow as a plant in those. And then after that, you take refuge, or you take the 3 pure precepts, which are to stop doing bad stuff, to do good stuff, and then to embrace living beings. To stop doing bad stuff, to do good stuff, and to embrace living beings. So I think of those oftentimes as kind of gradations or coarseness of our intention. When you're going about in the world, the first thing you can do if you find you have negative karma moving through your being, you can just stop. You can say, I will not do that because that's bad. And that's all I can hold on to right now. That's my intention. So you enact that, or you don't enact that. You stop doing a bad thing. After you get your mind and heart settles a bit more clarifying happens with these, then you can say, okay, I want to do the good things. I have a feeling that I recognize what's harmful, and I can do the good things. And in a way, we can think about that in terms of our relationship with this mirror here. If you're doing the good things, and the causes and conditions of your life are such, you can be hanging out in the human realms and the heavenly realms and having a nice kind of stability in uprightness that's really hard to maintain in the other realms. So the next one, to embrace living beings. Embrace living beings. I really think that this one points at a Bodhisattva vow that says, no matter what appears, that will be my place of practice. No matter what appears, that will be what I have to work with there, and what I can do my very best to hope cross over into awakening with that being, with this situation. So then if we read back through those, the Bodhisattva vows we say, with that kind of theory in mind, look at this through embracing living beings. Of course, the first one seems pretty obvious. And then delusions are inexhaustible, I vow to end them. Maybe we could say that the first one points a little bit towards the outside, a perception of outside. Delusions are inexhaustible. That points a little bit more towards the inside. Dharma Gates are boundless. Every moment is my ability to be practicing. And then lastly, the Buddha way is unsurpassable. I vow to realize it. That we can actually become the Buddha in each realm, offering medicine to living beings. Right? That can be our intention. Well, I'm doing good with time, so maybe I'll push on a little bit more and we can make some time for conversation. So I also put up here, this is another, let me jump in now.
Where were you getting the when you were reading about livelihood and not selling slaves, where was that from? What were you?
I actually don't know.
Okay.
Something I found on the interwebs that I learned.
Okay.
Yeah, I can send it to you if you like.
Okay.
Yeah. So I decided to also include what are called the 6 perfections, or you'll also hear them talked about as the 6 Paramitas. So people who have been listening to talks by Ejo for some time, he'll often give a talk that says it'll be the perfection of meditation, and he'll give 3 talks on that, or the perfection of virya, or the perfection of energy. These are the perfections he's talking about. It's the set core group, which you could say in our particular tradition is really the way we'll talk about path most often. I'm not sure what happened historically, but the Eightfold Path isn't quite used, I think, in China and other Buddhist streams that flowed on after Buddhism came to China and went out from there into Korea and some places in Thailand and Vietnam and Japan. So anywho, just a little aside. The 6 perfections are used, and they map up fairly well with this Eightfold Path. But really here, so we have generosity and ethics, patience, zeal, and what is it? So ethics, also it's interesting, that word doesn't have a great translation. That can also be, the other translation we have are discipline, which doesn't really have a nice ring for many of us, as well as morality. So just to put that out there, patience, zeal, energy, and vigor are the other words. Concentration, which can also be talked about straight up as meditation or samadhi, and wisdom. These guys, they are said to particularly talk to each other and correspond. So ethics and generosity, really related. When you're working on one, you're almost very much like pressing up against the other one. Patience and energy, totally pressing up against each other, and as well as concentration or meditation and wisdom. Meditation and wisdom. And in many, especially in olden times, teaching about the path, mostly people who were not ordained were not taught concentration and wisdom. That was really the place for renunciates. It was said that you can only basically handle so much as a layperson, and that this world of concentration for wisdom, you weren't quite cut out for it. Maybe in another life. So, anyway, I think that's a really good point to bring up, because when we go sit and face the wall, and you haven't been walking around in a forest all morning, and instead you've been at work or taking care of your kids or something, and your mind's a little like turning out of your skull, you can say, yes, like maybe if I was walking through the woods all morning, this would be quite a different situation. So I offer you that. You can take that. So let's draw some lines. Be fun. Oh no, we have a really hard line to start. We'll do it. This concentration. Oh, how does that work? Human wisdom. There it is. I think this is going to ruin the whole thing. So here it's interesting. Wisdom and this place where the path is deepened and intensified, and we get more layers of things, comes at the end of the 6 perfections, and then it comes at the beginning of the Eightfold Path. So you can just play with that, feel how that moves around for you. And generosity and right intention. Generosity and right thought. And patience and right thought. I could probably just send you all this graphic later too. Should be good. So ethics goes. Ethics has a beautiful kind of one-to-one correlation like we've been talking about. All 3 of those in ethics. Right effort and energy. Zeal. Mindfulness and meditation. Yeah. Yes. Concentration. Yeah. Okay. How's that look? So really I point this out, not that you have to take a snapshot of this, but I think it's nice to weave that web together and realize you might come across, there's another Tibetan version of the path, which is also called the Lam Rim. So if you're looking and bouncing around in different traditions, you'll find lots of different formations of this path. I can think of 4 or 5 right now. And another one in the Theravada tradition I think is really beautiful. It's often described, it starts out with generosity, and then it goes towards ethics, and then it goes towards, basically it says the heavenly realms. Like, please go hang out at the heavenly realms. Do that, cultivate that. Isn't that great? And then recognition of the suffering that still remains in the heavenly realms. You've done everything right. It's as good as it can get. And look at that. You need to realize you're still dissatisfied. And then comes the point of renunciation and taking up the path, basically. And that also fits really well with the myth of the Buddha's life, that he was supposedly good looking, great at everything, gonna inherit a kingdom, like had a lovely wife. Everything was really as good as it could be. And in fact, he was said to be really just virtuous too, that he and his wife were constantly talking about how to make the world better for people. But he was still disturbed on, I guess you could say, a more metaphysical level, saying like, actually, we're all falling apart and we're all running from it. Is that just gonna be the way we live? Is that it? Is that all we can do? Is try and make things as good as they can, but still everything's gonna fall apart and we're gonna have our hearts broken? And so that was the realization that had him leave the palace, it said, and go and decide to take on a spiritual quest. So I think that's what I have to offer. So, yeah.
The difference between these are just from different schools, essentially. You get the 6 versus the 8.
Yeah. And I mean, basically, I think you can form different kinds of conversations about them, but really they have all the same pieces. They have all the same pieces. Another piece in there is that for the 6 perfections, it's often drawn with wisdom at the very center, and that each one of them is touching the other, but they're all animated by wisdom. And then further, there's the side of all of these that's good, like it's good to be generous, it's good to be ethical, patience, but it talks about good as being limited. So it says, watch out how, what's the right way to say this? That's not the way I want to put it. There's a way for generosity to go beyond, just making your situation better, and there's a generosity that can turn you towards the path of liberation. So perhaps, like, I often think about the challenges of people who are unhoused, and how part of me gives money. I give $5, and that's good. Or we could think about ending homelessness. So if my child is crying and I give them a lollipop and it gets them to stop crying for a bit, oh, that was good. Or I could work with them in a deeper way that says, maybe Dad's got to go to work for a bit and you'll have to face this, and I see you, and we're going to move towards something bigger. So I think that's where wisdom is trying to point us towards a deeper, more full understanding of what it means to help living beings that is beyond just being good. Yeah. Okay, so I actually did it. I talked less than I thought I was going to, and we have time for more conversation and seeing what's churning for everyone. And also I'd invite people to ping off of each other. Most of our questions or conversations have been me with one person, and that's fine if it happens like that, but it'd also be nice if we could have more conversation too. Yeah, James.
Genjo, can you talk a little bit more about Dharma Gates?
Yeah.
Because I think that's probably not immediately clear.
Mm-hmm. Do they have that?
And what they are.
Dharma Gates or numberless. My shot off the cuff for you is I think it's really pointing at right view and right thought. And, I don't know how much you've hung out with various Buddhist communities, but there's this kind of twofold safety net to try and make things go well. And one is you tell people to be considerate of others. And the other thing you tell people when inevitably you're annoyed by someone or someone does something wrong, you say, oh, well, that's just good for your practice. It's really bothersome when it happens, but also it's great because it says, oh, it really is an opportunity for you. And sometimes we can just think it's an opportunity to just kind of like stuff it and hold on to something, or we can think it's an opportunity for skillful response. And sometimes that means communication or whatnot. And I bring that up because I think, yeah, it's pointing to the idea that our life is this opportunity to receive our karma, whatever that is, the kind of gut reaction we might have about how we want to take care of things, control things, and then to learn to see that as really an opportunity that is endless, going on all the time. Yeah. Does that feel like it gets at an itch for you?
Yeah, to come off what you said about like, what is it? The beings outside, delusions inside, Dharma Gates. It's like time.
Oh.
Every single moment is a Dharma Gate.
Yeah,
So it's
yeah,
like
that's great.
outside, inside, and time through
Yeah,
time.
yeah.
And then I guess Buddha is just Buddha.
Buddhas, including all of that. Folks online, could you hear that? Okay. Oh, I had some people nodding yes and some people nodding no. So that, what is it? Beings are numberless as kind of outside perception of beings, out in the world. Delusions as something being inside, the karma from the inside that you're working with. And then Dharma Gates being connected to time explicitly. That there's no kind of point later or point past, that it's all one unfolding kind of opportunity to practice and to wake up. And then the Buddha way, just kind of like blowing away all, walls and barriers.
So that, Genjo, to me that kind of relates back to what you were saying before about, I think it was, I don't know if it was related to interdependent origination, but it was, you said something about how, I think it was, the beings are numberless as out of freedom, how each being, you can learn to recognize like a new, like when you are encountering a being, that's not like you encounter, that's like recognizing that a new being is created each time you're encountering a new being. I don't know, that's what you were saying, that's kind of like how I was thinking about it. So is that like another way to think about this, like, if time is a different moment each time, encountering a new being or sensation or whatever it is a new you that can then be liberated?
Yeah. Totally. I'm not sure if that's immediately what this is pointing to, but I really enjoy that spin on it. And in fact, we have sort of the founder of this particular school of Buddhism. He's really fond of talking Dogen Zenji. People have heard this name thrown around. Japanese man, went to China, studied with someone for a while, brought back those teachings to Japan, which weren't established there yet. He's really fond of saying, like, basically what you're saying, that if this no self and impermanence are taken to their extreme, or just like kind of their essence is subtractive and implied, it means that every moment, we have any idea of a self that's here, it's that there's more of an emergence of new self every moment, that there's this kind of profound, ever new and fresh being that we are in touch with moment by moment.
It's like the self in context rather than the self as observer.
Yeah, definitely. One thing I think.
And then I had one other thought on the Eightfold Path, and I enjoyed you said that they perhaps arose through different cultures, taking the teachings and then like reformulating them so they're easier to digest. And then that was making me think that perhaps the original Eightfold Path was meant for the more monastic lifestyle. That's why it's like wisdom's at the top. And then with like generosity at the top of the sixth perfection seems to be, I guess, easier for a lay person to kind of get, like, at least for me, living in a world where it's very transactional, like, and then being able to like immediately say, oh, when I give things away, I feel good.
Yeah, yeah.
It's like at least a little easier for me to digest things than I'll just sit and think about things, or just be very mindful, and then I'll understand. But to me, it's kind of like it feels like the six perfections is kind of like a way to like make it more accessible. If that.
Sure, I totally feel. I really love how our tradition just says, "It's fine. Just give stuff away. You don't have to know much, but you can feel when you're holding tight to something, and you can just relax that grip and almost let something begrudgingly fall from your hand, and that's a great way to start."
Yeah, I feel like that was a good entry point for me, because it was like, instead of just standing on the sideline and trying to figure things out before I jump in, it's like just jump in and kind of figure it out once you're in the water, I guess. Yeah. Just kind of like trust that you'll be okay.
And as for your historical point, I would say though that I would doubt that formulation was really more directed for lay people. In what I know about, early monastic culture in China and Japan, but I don't know. But the same kind of maybe, I don't want to call it elitism, but separation between what we could conventionally call lay people and ordained people, that it was still pretty pronounced, something that we're not so familiar with and is really different from our cultural Buddhism in America today. Yeah, thank you.
So I really enjoyed the video link you sent to Thich Nhat Hanh's talk, and just so beautifully explaining the Four Noble Truths. And coming from a science background, this is one of the things that I love about Buddhism, that although there's faith involved, so many of the tenets can almost be derived from another tenet logically, that he talks about. There is suffering, so obviously there is a cause, a path that brings suffering, and if there is suffering, obviously there is the opposite. And if there is well-being, then there's a path to well-being. And so you only really need to accept one of those, and the other three become obvious.
Yeah.
So that was just a really clear and beautiful explanation. Thank you.
If you didn't watch it, the follow-on video, I don't know, YouTube just said, hey, you want to watch this next? He continues on to talk about the Eightfold Path, and it's really good. Mm-hmm. It's long, I think it's like 40 or 50 minutes, but it's good. If you have an opportunity, over time.
Do you all remember when Thich Nhat Hanh, what he says, he finishes explaining all that, and then he just smiles, and he says, it's so simple. And then everyone just bursts out laughing and is so happy. I really love that moment.
Yeah, I have read his books before, but I'd never heard or seen him, and so it was really delightful to
yeah. Oh, such a Buddha.
Yeah.
I'd be curious from anyone, is there anything in these teachings or in this kind of, I would say I've been offering kind of a big web, like a matrix of how all these pieces link together. Are there any parts that are just like, man, that does not connect to my lived experience? Something in there that is just like a major outlier, or why it seems useful, just seems. The pieces kind of interlocking enough.
It's just a logical thing.
Yeah.
It's just one thing leads to another, and the way is simple if you just think about it.
But is it thinking about it? That's where I always get caught. It's like, yeah, this looks so good on paper.
Yeah,
but,
it looks so good on paper. It looks like it's such an easy way to do things.
Yeah.
Until you try to do that.
I think one of the keys in there about like why that's so, the right word, looks so good on paper, but it's so hard in actuality. The Four Noble Truths back here. I think the way that the third noble truth is put is really curious and pointing to that difficulty, that cessation is not necessarily something, it's not something else. It's a quieting of the thing that we see. Does that make sense? Here, let's put this out. I think this is a really interesting point, and why growth and change and growing and becoming healthier human beings is so hard. Because the word here is there is a cessation of suffering is the word. And so I think in drawing on kind of our work with the wheel, there's all this talk about the danger, the beauty, and the difficulty in the heavenly realms and the human realms. And it's because you will feel good. Not that that's a bad thing, but that you will think that you've got it. You'll be like, I did all the right things. Now I'm feeling good. And that's what the end of suffering is, right? Now that I'm feeling good. And you will no longer take up the effort that got you there in the first place. You will hunker down in the heavenly realm and enjoy that. And that's good. You'll have to do that. You'll have to make that mistake. I don't even know it's really a mistake, but you'll have to go through that process. And then you will fall down, in a sense. And I don't know if it necessarily has to look like, the Ashura realm or the Hungry Ghost realm, but in my experience, it's not too different. That when I've been hanging out in bliss for a while, and then it's like, oh, it's Sunday and it's 9:30, and I have to get up at 4 in the morning the next day, something kind of crashes down that I've taken my eye off of. So, I don't know, I think there's something really beautiful, I think, that it's talked about, that actually just the intensity of all these realms will be really different for one who is really aware of their karma and interacting with it in a skillful way and has had the causes and conditions and the practice to clarify it. That we can, in one sense, gain a kind of grace in moving through these worlds and the ups and flows of our experience. I don't know, does that jog anything for anyone else? Does that feel interesting?
Well, isn't that's the beauty of the Diamond Sutra, right? Like that last line where you're like, you're gonna try and help everyone realize the path, and it's still there. It's all.
That if you think you've ever done it.
Then it's different, yeah.
Totally,
Right.
Exactly. It's really keeping you pressed against the suffering. It's keeping you aware that you'll never find a place that you can just hunker down and grab. And even, what's amazing is the Buddha. We say that the Buddha did this. Like, let's say he did relieve the suffering, but actually what he got was thousands of followers who were super messed up. And it said this happens in a monastery too. Is if you stay at the monastery forever, you get totally like in the zone. You really clarify yourself. You're asked to teach. It's basically said you can't. Now you don't get just to go off in a cave and bliss out. It's your responsibility to take up all the rascally young monks as your thoughts. Like those now become your Dharma Gates. The teaching becomes teaching and meeting living beings, these corporeal beings out there. Those become your Dharma Gates. So you never really get to go to that place of perfect bliss. You're always, and maybe you're blissed out while you're doing it. I don't know. Most of the very wise people looked a bit stressed now and again that I've met, but they're willing and able to press up against people without retreat. And I think that's kind of the really truly amazing thing about, wise people I've encountered.
Have you read Old Catholic Clouds? It's interesting to me how like a lot of the interesting stuff happens, or the majority of the book happens after the Buddha's enlightenment, and it's not like he was enlightened then historian, and it's like a whole bunch of travails and troubles happened after that, and I think it's like you said, like he collected all these monks, and all the monks kept fighting and stuff. Like there's a part in the book where two monks fight, and the Buddha just leaves. Like he's just like, you guys figure it out. It's really interesting to me how it's like, yeah, like there is no, it doesn't just end after he like starts teaching. Like that's really just the beginning of the Buddha's story.
Yeah, it's a really good point. Anyone else? Cindy, you wanna jump in?
So I have this really snarky sense of humor. And to try and have the right thoughts and the right speech is very difficult when you see the world as just a big kind of lot of humor in it. And to think, now how am I going to make my thoughts just go down this right path instead of heading off in these zones,
Yeah.
in my Facebook zones where I make all these political incorrect.
Mm-hmm. There's a teaching I really love where monks are given instructions on how to collect cloths to sew their robes. So in India, actually in olden times, cloth, we live in this huge abundance of cloth with all these, mechanicalized, what are they called, looms? And the amount of cloth we just have is absurd. So cloth used to be really valuable. And so they would go around collecting, burial rags and menstrual rags and like shit rags, basically. That would be the best material to sew your robe. And the instruction was to pick up a piece of cloth, hold it in a certain way, tear off what can't be used, discard that, and keep what can be used. Keep going. And then you'll eventually gather enough cloth to make a robe. But I think that statement is also true with people, with our intention with other people. When there's things you really love about people and things that you think are unskillful or harmful, one thing we can do is just double down on what you think is beautiful about someone, what you think is wonderful, and keep that in your energy, beam, and let the other parts fall away. And you can't always do that for many, many reasons, but day to day it can be a really skillful way to go forward. And I think also with our own thoughts and our own tendencies and our intentions. So what's helpful and wonderful about your humor? What are places where it's harmful to people or yourself? And no one can really make that case for you, but you can investigate that and decide to maybe holster a joke here and there or tell more jokes here and there when the time's necessary. Does that feel like that could be a way to kind of be authentic? And really, it requires just becoming more and more honest with ourselves about our actions and our intention.
I also have a really, humor is very important to me, and it's my primary way of coping with the world. And I also have those thoughts of like, do I have to give up being funny about things? And realizing that trying to look at the world as only a positive place is also delusional. The world is really messed up in many ways, and people are funny, and just trying to use humor as a way to accept the messed up stuff and cope with it and make people laugh about it, and instead of ignoring it, pretending it doesn't exist, but a way to acknowledge it in a way that's helpful, maybe, of helping people see it, or helping myself see it and cope with it without getting depressed.
Yeah, amen. And I think actually that, like what you said there, really also points to how, let's say, the Eightfold Path, and let's say there's a deepening of our understanding of our own intention and of our own ethical conduct in the world, that the path isn't asking for us to discard habits and intentions we have to get an image of what is right or good. It's actually asking you to just start paying attention and taking care of like really what is right, what can you see right now. It's not asking you to say take this image and swallow the pill and do X, Y, and Z. It's saying start looking at these different areas and attending to them, and then as Buddhists will do, sit quietly and reflect and let your soul move through the floor into the earth, let your roots grow deeper, and then see what you see then. See what you see then. And let that process just continue. Let it continue. And then when you're ready to let go of something, you can. And there doesn't need to be such a struggle or like an imposition from the outside.
Do you know the reading that you gave us, the Bhikkhu? I don't know.
Tanisaru Bhikkhu?
Yeah. One of the fascinating chapters in there I thought was comparing the Buddha way to ego, or to like Freud's ego. And that is like one of the essential things they talk about is humor, and how the Buddha used humor to like describe the path, and that it is a matter of discipline, but you have to have humor in the discipline in order to continue doing it, or you'll just...
Where was the Buddha funny? I'm always looking for instances of that,
yeah,
and I haven't found
he
any.
provides some examples,
Okay.
and they don't seem all that funny, but he does, he's like, see, it's a joke, and you're like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, he does have some examples in there.
Cool, I'll take you that. Some one-liners?
Yeah.
I read something somewhere about he saw a dung beetle and said to something about he knew what that dung beetle did in his other life or something. I don't know. And then I read again then somewhere that he had no sense of humor at all. That I don't see how he could not have had a sense of humor in dealing with people.
So, one of the other classes we were talking about the story of Angulimala. And so the Buddha's walking, he's short version is, he's going to some place. They've warned him, don't go through this forest. There's this killer out there. And he's been killing all kinds of people. The Buddha goes anyway. So he's walking along. And along comes Angulimala. He's chasing after him. And, first he's like jogging. He's going, I'm going to catch this monk. And then the Buddha's just walking. And then he runs a little faster. And the Buddha's just walking. And pretty soon, Angulimala is running as fast and as hard as he can. He's not getting any closer. And the Buddha's just continuing to walk. Until Angulimala is basically just out of breath, torn up, stops. Says, what the hell? Stop. Now that fundamentally is a really comedic image. I mean, from my perspective. Now, whether there's intended humor there or not, but come on. The Buddha's just calmly walking along, knowing that this guy is just running as fast as he can to try to catch him, and can't do it. So I love that story, because there's a little part of me that says, the Buddha's trolling this guy a little bit. So, humor.
Humor, there it is. That's also, as I'm walking throughout all my days, turning everything I see into something for this class, as I hear that story, that also points really beautifully, I think, at the wheel of life and a lot of these teachings, that someone who uses force and power, and I guess force would be the kind of underlining thing there, to get something. When someone tries to get that which is totally full, or content, or at ease, the Buddha, it can't be gotten. It can't be gotten through force. And that actually will lead me to an interesting point that I'll offer you. I'm going to send everyone a kind of a big map of the Buddhist teachings that has almost all of these teachings that we've talked about on it. And there's one there that is, it's descriptions of enlightenment. And one of them is, it cannot be forcibly handled. It cannot be forcibly handled. Another one is, it cannot be carried away by thieves. Maybe I'll read them to you all now. It is not produced, it does not age, it does not suffer death, it does not pass out of existence, nor does it come into existence. It cannot be forcibly handled, it cannot be carried away by thieves, it rests on nothing, it is the pathway of the noble, it presents no obstacles, and it is endless. So that's fun, and we're out of time. So I will send out this sheet to people along with kind of a follow-up email. And my thought for next class is to have people look at this little matrix that's being sent out and see if it rustles up any more questions. And then I might present a little bit more on enlightenment and awakening, and maybe just a little bit more about path. But I don't have any firm plans, and likely we can think of any questions. And we can also move, I think, in a little bit into the practical. And probably somewhere in there I might give a little bit about how this idea of path, generosity, ethics, patience, also how all this might reflect in terms of formal practice at Buddha Eye Temple. I assume that many of you who are here in Eugene might like to be here in person more often at some point, and people abroad might also be interested in kind of what formal Zen practice is about and how does it plug in to all of this. What's all the robes and forms and bows and et cetera, how do those all link up? So that's the plan. Any other parting shots? Okay. We'll chant the Pali refugees to close.